ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real today, because a lot of people out here are trying to figure out what men want, what men are attracted to, what keeps a man interested, and I'm going to break it down for you in a way that's simple, honest, and powerful. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go deeper into this first truth, because this is where everything starts. And without this, nothing else really holds together confidence that comes from self-worth, not validation. Now I want you to really understand what I'm saying, because there is a major difference between a woman who is confident because she knows her value and a woman who is confident only when she is being validated by someone else. Those two things may look similar on the outside, but they are completely different in power, because one is stable and the other is dependent. Now listen carefully. A lot of people think confidence is about how you look, how you speak, how you walk into a room. But real confidence is not external, it is internal. It is how you feel about yourself when nobody is clapping for you. It is how you see yourself when nobody is texting you back. It is how you carry yourself when nobody is giving you attention. That is real confidence. Now let's break it down. When a woman's confidence is based on validation, her emotional state becomes controlled by outside responses. And if he calls, she feels good. If he doesn't, she feels anxious. If he compliments her, she feels worthy. If he pulls back, she questions herself. And slowly, without realizing it, her confidence starts rising and falling based on someone else's behavior. And that is not confidence, that is emotional dependency. But when confidence is rooted in self-worth, everything changes. Because now your value is not being decided in real time by someone else's actions. You already know who you are. You already understand your worth. You already respect yourself. So external behavior does not define your identity. It only reveals other people's intentions. Now let me tell you something important. A woman with self-worth does not chase validation. She does not over-explain her presence. She does not try to prove she is enough. She does not compete for attention. Because she is not operating from insecurity, she is operating from certainty. And certainty is powerful. Because when you are certain about yourself, you stop seeking permission to exist in your own space. Now, I want you to understand something very real. Confidence built on validation is fragile. It can break easily. It shifts quickly. It reacts emotionally. It gets disturbed by silence, by distance, by inconsistency. But confidence built on self-worth is steady. It does not shake when someone changes their tone. And it does not collapse when someone becomes distant. It does not disappear when attention is removed, because it was never dependent on attention in the first place. Now let's go deeper. A woman who knows her worth walks differently in life. She does not enter relationships trying to be chosen. She enters knowing she also has choice. She does not overextend herself to be accepted. She does not lower her standards to be liked. She does not fear losing someone who cannot meet her value. And that right there is where attraction begins to shift, because people can feel self-worth. It is not something you announce, it is something you carry. It is in how you respond, how you walk away, how you stay calm, how you don't panic when things are uncertain. Now let's talk about something important. When a woman's confidence is rooted in validation, she becomes emotionally reactive. She overthinks messages. She analyzes tone. She looks for meaning in silence. She tries to read between lines that were never written clearly. And all of that comes from one place, fear of not being enough. But when self-worth is strong, there is no need to decode everything. You observe behavior, not emotions. You respond to actions, not assumptions. You stay grounded, not emotionally shaken by every shift. Now listen carefully. Men can sense this difference immediately. And a man can tell when a woman is operating from insecurity versus when she is operating from self-assurance. Because one energy feels heavy, needy, and uncertain, while the other feels calm, stable, and centered. And let me tell you something, real calm confidence is attractive in a way that insecurity can never be. Because calm confidence does not demand attention, it naturally draws it. Now, I want you to understand something deeply. Self-worth does not mean you think you are better than everyone else. It means you don't see yourself as less than anyone either. It is balance. It is emotional grounding. It is knowing that your value does not increase when someone chooses you, and it does not decrease when someone walks away. Your value remains constant. Now let's go deeper into relationships. When a woman has self-worth-based confidence, she does not tolerate inconsistent behavior. Not because she has tried to control the man, but because she respects herself too much to stay in confusion. She does not need constant reassurance because she is not constantly doubting herself. And that changes everything in how she is treated, because people adjust to what you allow. Now here is something powerful. A woman who is confident from self-worth does not compete for attention. She does not try to be the most anything. She does not lose herself trying to be chosen. And she simply shows up as herself, and she lets alignment happen naturally. And when it does not happen, she does not break, she redirects. Now, let me bring this home for you. The strongest confidence you can ever have is not the kind that comes from someone telling you you are beautiful or desirable or enough. Those things are temporary. The strongest confidence is the kind you maintain even when nobody is reinforcing it. That is self-worth. And when you have that, everything changes. You stop chasing validation. You stop overthinking rejection. You stop measuring your worth based on attention. And you start moving through life with clarity. So ladies and gentlemen, understand this deeply. Confidence that comes from self-worth is not loud, it is not needy, it is not dependent, it is steady. And that steadiness is what makes it powerful enough to change how you are seen, how you are treated, and how you move through the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go deeper into this second truth, because this one right here is something men notice immediately. Even if they cannot always explain it clearly, emotional stability that brings peace, not drama. Now, I need you to understand something very important. A man may be attracted to excitement, but he builds his life around peace. He may be entertained by unpredictability in the short term, but in the long term, what he is really searching for is calm, something steady, something that does not constantly put his mind in emotional confusion. And that is where emotional stability becomes powerful. Now listen carefully. Emotional stability does not mean you have no feelings. It does not mean you never get upset, never get emotional, never express yourself. That is not what we are talking about. Emotional stability means your emotions are not controlling your behavior in destructive ways. It means you can feel something without losing yourself in it. You can be upset without creating chaos. You can be hurt without creating drama. You can be disappointed without turning it into a war. That is stability. Now let's break this down. When a woman is emotionally unstable, her reactions become unpredictable. Small issues become big arguments. Silence becomes suspicion. Delays become disrespect. Neutral behavior becomes personal offense. And suddenly every situation turns into emotional intensity. And living in that environment becomes exhausting for a man, because now he is not just dealing with life outside the relationship, he is also managing emotional turbulence inside it. But when a woman is emotionally stable, something different happens. She does not react to everything instantly. And she does not assume the worst immediately. She does not turn every moment into a crisis. She takes time to understand before responding. And that creates peace. Now, I want you to understand something deeply. Peace is not boring. Peace is not lack of passion. Peace is not emotional distance. Peace is safety. Peace is calm energy. Peace is knowing that the person you are dealing with is not going to emotionally explode over every misunderstanding. And that kind of environment is where real connection grows. Now, let's go deeper. Emotional stability also shows in communication. A stable woman does not communicate from panic. She does not send messages out of fear. She does not react impulsively to silence. She does not create stories in her mind and then respond to those stories instead of reality. She waits. She observes. She understands. And then she responds. Now listen carefully. Men are not looking for perfection, but they are looking for emotional safety, because life itself is already stressful. Work is stressful. Responsibilities are stressful. The world is unpredictable. So when a man comes into a relationship, he is not looking for more chaos. He is looking for relief. And emotional stability provides that relief. Now let's go deeper into why drama pushes people away. Drama creates tension. Drama creates confusion. Drama creates emotional exhaustion. And when everything becomes a reaction, the relationship stops feeling like a safe space and starts feeling like a constant emotional test. And nobody thrives in constant emotional testing. But stability creates trust, because trust is not just about loyalty, it is about emotional predictability in a healthy way. It is knowing that even if there is a disagreement, it will not turn into chaos. It is knowing that even if something goes wrong, it can be discussed calmly. That is what builds long-term connection. Now I want you to understand something important. Emotional stability is not about suppressing feelings. It is about processing them properly. It is about not letting temporary emotions make permanent decisions. It is about not reacting in ways you will regret later, because unstable reactions often create long-term damage from short-term emotions. Now let's talk about attraction. A man may be drawn to intensity at first, but intensity without stability burns out quickly. But calm energy combined with emotional maturity creates something lasting. It creates respect. It creates trust. It creates comfort. And comfort is something people return to. Now let me say something very real. A woman who brings emotional peace into a man's life becomes unforgettable in a different way. Not because she is loud or dramatic or constantly trying to get attention, but because her presence feels like balance. She does not drain him emotionally. She does not create unnecessary conflict. She does not turn every situation into pressure. She understands timing. She understands communication. She understands emotional control. And that makes her rare. Now let's go deeper. Emotional stability also changes how conflicts are handled. Instead of reacting immediately, she pauses. Instead of escalating, she de-escalates. Instead of assuming, she asks. Instead of accusing, she listens. And that shift changes everything. Because now problems are not destroying the connection, they are being handled within it. Now I need you to understand something deeply. Drama does not create love. Drama creates emotional fatigue. But stability creates space for understanding. And understanding is what keeps people connected when things are not perfect. Now let's bring this together. When a woman is emotionally stable, she becomes a place of calm in a world full of noise. And that calmness is powerful. It makes communication easier. It makes connection deeper. It makes interaction more meaningful. And without even trying, she stands out. Not because she is doing more, but because she is reacting less. So ladies and gentlemen, understand this deeply. Emotional stability is not about being emotionless, it is about being grounded. And when you bring peace instead of drama, you don't just attract attention, you attract respect, trust, and lasting connection. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's go deeper into this third truth. Because this is where real natural attraction starts to show up without effort to authentic femininity that is natural, not forced. Now, I need you to understand something very clearly because in today's world, a lot of confusion has been created around what femininity actually is. Some people think it is about acting a certain way. Some people think it is about being overly soft, overly quiet, or changing your personality to fit someone's expectation. But that is not femininity, that is performance. And anything that is performed eventually becomes exhausting. Now listen carefully. Authentic femininity is not about becoming someone else. It is about being fully yourself in your natural energy without pretending, without forcing, and without trying to fit into a mold. It is when a woman is comfortable in her emotional expression, in her communication, in her presence, without feeling like she has to act a role to be accepted. That is what feels real. Now let's go deeper. Men are not drawn to perfection. They are drawn to authenticity. Because authenticity feels alive. It feels natural. And it feels easy to connect with. When a woman is not trying too hard to impress, not overthinking how she appears, not calculating every word, her energy becomes relaxed. And that relaxation is attractive because it does not feel forced. Now, I want you to understand something important. Forced behavior is always detectable. When someone is acting, when someone is trying too hard, when someone is not comfortable in their own skin, it creates tension. Even if everything looks fine on the surface, something feels unnatural underneath. But when a woman is simply being herself, there is no tension. There is flow. There is ease. There is natural expression. And that is what creates connection. Now let's break this down further. Authentic femininity is not about being one way all the time. It is about being real in every moment. If you are happy, you show it naturally. If you are upset, you express it in a healthy way. If you are quiet, you are comfortable in your silence. If you are expressive, you are comfortable in your voice. There is no performance. And that consistency in being real creates emotional safety for the other person. Now listen carefully. Men are not looking for someone who is perfect at acting a role. They are looking for someone who feels genuine, someone who is not trying to impress every second, someone who does not feel like they are constantly managing an image. And because managing an image is tiring. Now let's go deeper. When a woman forces femininity, it becomes obvious in small ways, in how she speaks, in how she reacts, and how she responds. There is a lack of natural flow. There is hesitation. There's overthinking. There's a need to be correct instead of just being real. But authenticity does not question itself constantly. It simply exists. Now I want you to understand something deeply. Authentic femininity is not about being soft all the time. It is not about never having opinions. It is not about never being strong or direct. It is about balance. It is about being real in your full range of expression without losing your identity. A woman can be strong and still be feminine. A woman can be confident and still be feminine. A woman can be direct and still be feminine. Because femininity is not weakness, it is energy. And energy does not require performance. Now let's go deeper into attraction. Authenticity creates comfort, and comfort creates connection. When someone feels that you are not pretending, they relax around you. They don't feel like they have to decode your behavior. They don't feel like they are interacting with a mask. They feel like they are interacting with a real person. And that is rare in today's world. Now listen carefully. Forced femininity often comes from insecurity. It comes from trying to be accepted. It comes from trying to be liked. It comes from trying to match an image of what you think is desirable. But authentic femininity comes from self-acceptance. It comes from knowing who you are and not feeling the need to adjust your personality to gain approval. And that difference is powerful because self-acceptance removes pressure from every interaction. Now let's go deeper. When a woman is authentic, she is not focused on how she is being perceived every second. She is focused on being present. She is not overanalyzing her behavior. She is not editing herself constantly. She is not trying to control every impression. She is simply present. And presence is magnetic. Now, I need you to understand something very important. Men may not always consciously analyze authenticity, but they feel it. They feel when someone is real. They feel when someone is relaxed in their own energy. They feel when someone is not performing. And that feeling creates attraction that is natural, not forced. Now let's talk about connection. Real connection cannot be built on performance because performance always has limits. It always requires effort to maintain. It always feels slightly artificial over time. But authenticity does not require maintenance. It simply continues to be itself. And that consistency builds trust. Now I want you to understand something deeply. An authentic femininity also allows space for individuality. It does not copy others. It does not imitate behaviors to fit in. It does not change personality depending on who is around. It remains grounded in identity. And identity is powerful because when you know who you are, you don't need to become someone else to be valued. Now let's bring this together. A woman who is authentically herself brings ease into relationships. She reduces tension. She reduces confusion. She creates a space where connection can grow without pressure. And that is what makes her memorable. Not because she is trying to be noticed, but because she is real enough to be felt. So ladies and gentlemen, understand this deeply. Authentic femininity is not about acting, it is about being. And when you are natural, grounded, and real in your energy, you don't just attract attention, you attract genuine connection. Ladies and gentlemen, now we come to the final truth in this message. And this is the one that separates women who are overlooked from women who are truly valued, standards and self-respect that command value. Now, I need you to understand something very clearly from the beginning. A man does not decide your value. A relationship does not decide your value. Attention does not decide your value. Your value is already there. The real question is not whether you have value. The real question is whether you recognize it, protect it, and require others to respect it. And that is where standards come in. Now listen carefully. Standards are not about being difficult. Standards are not about being controlling. Standards are not about trying to punish someone for not behaving the way you want. Standards are about clarity. They're about defining what is acceptable in your life and what is not. And when your standards are clear, your life becomes clear. Now let's go deeper. A woman with no standards becomes a woman with confusion in her relationships. Because without standards, everything becomes negotiable. Inconsistent behavior becomes normal. Mixed signals become acceptable. Emotional unavailability becomes something to wait on. And slowly, without realizing it, she starts adjusting herself to fit someone else's inconsistency. And that is where self-respect starts to fade. But when standards are strong, something powerful happens. You stop adjusting yourself to people who cannot meet you where you are. You stop lowering your expectations to keep someone comfortable. You stop accepting behavior that does not match your emotional needs. And that creates structure. Now, I want you to understand something important. Self-respect is not something you say, it is something you show. It is shown in what you tolerate. It is shown in what you walk away from. It is shown in how long you stay in situations that do not align with you. Because every time you accept less than you deserve, you are sending a message not to them, but to yourself. Now let's go deeper. A woman with self-respect does not beg for attention. She does not chase consistency. She does not convince someone to value her. She does not over-explain her worth because she already understands that if someone cannot see it, she does not need to prove it. And that mindset changes everything. Now listen carefully. Standards act like a filter in your life. They automatically separate what aligns with you from what does not. When you have strong standards, you don't need to constantly evaluate people emotionally. Their behavior gets evaluated by your boundaries. And that creates clarity. Now I want you to understand something deeply. A man will always respond to the level of access you allow. If access is easy, effort decreases. If access is unlimited, value is assumed. But when access is balanced with standards, effort increases naturally because now nothing is guaranteed. And what is not guaranteed becomes valued more. Now let's talk about respect. Respect is not something you demand, it is something you require through behavior. When you respect yourself, you don't stay where you are not respected. You don't entertain inconsistency for long. You don't normalize emotional confusion. You don't accept unclear intentions as just how things are. You respond, and that response is your standard in action. Now let's go deeper into why this matters so much. Without standards, emotions take control. You start making decisions based on how you feel in the moment instead of what is right for you long term. You tolerate things you should not tolerate because of temporary emotional attachment. But standards bring balance back. They remind you that feelings are not the only factor in decisions. Now, I need you to understand something very powerful. When a woman has strong standards, she does not need to force anyone to choose her, because her standards naturally eliminate people who are not aligned. She does not have to argue for respect. She does not have to fight for consistency. She does not have to compete for attention, because her presence is already structured by boundaries, and boundaries reveal intention. Now let's go deeper. Some people will resist your standards. Some people will question them. Some people will try to negotiate them. Some people will try to make you feel like you are asking for too much. But that resistance is not a problem, it is information. Because the right person does not struggle with your standards. They respect them. Now I want you to understand something deeply. Self-respect also changes your emotional state. When you know you are not tolerating less than you deserve, you are calmer. You are more centered. You are less anxious about losing people who are not aligned. You are not constantly trying to secure approval because your approval comes from within. Now let's bring this together. Standards create structure. Structure creates clarity. Clarity creates peace. And peace creates better choices in relationships. Without standards, everything becomes emotional guessing. But with standards, everything becomes visible. Now here is the final truth. A woman who values herself does not chase confusion. She does not stay where she is not valued. She does not sacrifice her self-respect for temporary attention. She does not lower her standards to keep someone present. She stands firm, and that firmness is what commands value. So ladies and gentlemen, understand this deeply. Standards and self-respect are not about pushing people away. They are about protecting your peace. And when you live by them, you don't have to force anyone to choose you, because only the right people will remain close enough to do it willingly.